Welcome to Canadian Football League Weekly, presented by the World of Football. Each week, we recap the games played north of the border in the CFL, and we also look ahead to next week's games. I'm Randy Snow, and I'm joined, as always, by my son, Adam.
Hi, how you doing? A little later than usual this week, but we figured it was Labor Day weekend coming up. We took an extra day to record and to get it up. And I've been moving, so I've been busy.
Yeah, I see a different background there. It's not your normal
Yeah,
one that you had.
the new dining room. Yep, just doing it out here temporarily till I get the office set up. So
Okay,
yeah,
whatever. That works.
it works for me. Um, I guess we could real quick. We want to let everybody out there know that some of the other shows we got going on. Uh, check out our weekly podcast, This Week in the World of Football. We release that every Tuesday. We just had a hot mess of an episode this past week. Please go check that one out. Kyle and I have been doing Just Lying Around, a Detroit Lions podcast. Keeping up with the Lions. They just got done with their third preseason game, and then we're going to have a new one looking at their upcoming game against the Rams to start the regular season. And of course, the big one, our weekly NFL picks videos are coming back September 4th. Be on the lookout for those. And be sure, if you are following the podcast or following the YouTube stream, rather, that there should be a post in the community tab for you guys to drop your picks. So if you want to join us this season doing the weekly NFL picks, you can drop those a little early. And maybe we'll mention you on the show next week. So, yep, go over there and do that.
Yeah, thanks for showing me where that community tab was, because I never would have found it if you hadn't taken me by the
Yeah,
hand and showed me where it
it
was.
is a little difficult if you don't know where you're looking.
Yeah. And for those of you who do listen to This Week in the World of Football, uh, our audio podcast, if you like a train wreck, you're going to love this week's episode because, man, oh man, it was so many mistakes. Things went wrong and miscues. I'm telling you. We're blaming it on the heat because it was 96 degrees here in Michigan that day. So
Yeah,
I don't know, but hopefully we'll do a lot better next time.
that's what we say every week, and I
I
don't know if we follow through.
No, and usually we don't, but what the heck. Before we get started, I do have a correction from last week. On our highlights last week during the Edmonton Hamilton game, I kept saying that quarterback Taylor Powell was the quarterback of the Edmonton Elks. He's the quarterback for Hamilton. He's the one that got injured, and they brought in Bo Levi Mitchell
Yeah,
to replace him. So
I made the
my
same
mistake.
mistake, so
Yeah, it must have been hot
it
that day
happens.
too. So. All right, well, let's get into the Week 12 scores for the CFL.
Let's do it.
On Thursday, it was the Toronto Argonauts over the Saskatchewan Roughriders by the score of 20-19. After Saskatchewan kicker Brett Lother opened the scoring with a field goal, Saskatchewan quarterback Trevor Harris completed a touchdown pass to wide receiver Keyshawn Johnson for a 10-0 Saskatchewan lead at the end of the first quarter. In the second quarter, defensive back Deshaun Amos intercepted a pass and was stopped just short of the goal line. This set up a 1-yard touchdown run by backup quarterback Cameron Dukes. Toronto added a field goal, and the score was 13-10 at the end of the half in favor of Saskatchewan. The two teams traded field goals in the second half. There were 3 by Toronto and 2 by Saskatchewan until the score was tied 19-19 with 1:02 left in the game. But as time expired, Toronto missed a 40-yard field goal, but it went out of the end zone for a rouge, and therefore the Argos won the game by the score of 20-19. Quarterback Chad Kelly completed 24 of 39 passes for 322 yards, no touchdowns, and an interception. Backup quarterback Cameron Dukes had a rushing touchdown. Wide receiver DeMonte Coxie had 5 catches for 112 yards. Kicker Lyram Hiralahu made 4 of 5 field goals, including the walk-off miss for a rouge. On defense, defensive back Mark Milton had 7 tackles and 1 tackle for loss. For Saskatchewan, quarterback Trevor Harris completed 18 of 29 passes for 190 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. Running back Frankie Hickson ran the ball 16 times for 79 yards, and wide receiver Samuel Emelis led the receiving corps with 8 catches for 66 yards. Kicker Brett Lother was 4 for 4 on field goals. On defense, linebacker C.J. Rivas had 10 tackles and a sack. Quarterback Chad Kelly started the game after being reinstated by the league and it was his first start of the year. You really didn't think he was coming back, but he was out for like 9 games, I think, and they finally said, okay, you can come back with some restrictions, but we don't know what those are.
Yeah, I just figured, the league would want to avoid any sort of controversy or controversy, however you want to pronounce the word. I thought for sure that they would just, just be rid of it and, dust their hands of it and move on. So a little
Yeah,
surprised, but, if, I hate to see anybody just kind of kick to the curb. I'm all for second chances. I don't know how many chances Chad
sure.
Kelly's gotten, but if, he's doing good on his end of the bargain and he's doing what the CFL is, asking him to do as part of that stipulation,
Yeah.
then more power to him and good for him for hopefully completing it and turning a corner and just moving forward. Because I would understand wanting to put all that stuff behind him and just going forward. He looked sharp. I mean, threw an interception, but I felt like the Argos looked a little different with him out there as opposed to Cameron Dukes. But we'll see. Well, we got to give him a couple weeks to see if he can get into actual uh, typical Chad Kelly shape we were kind of used to.
Yeah. Yeah, I know a lot of people were really up in arms about this walk-off rouge. A lot of
Yeah.
the Americans that follow the CFL don't understand. We know about this. We know that's a possibility anytime, and we're fine with it. But yeah, people were just going out of their minds saying, "How can you miss a field goal and win a game that way?" But you know
Yeah.
what? You know what? 3 times during this game, the Argos were denied on a 3rd and goal at the 1 yard line,
Yeah.
and the Argos never led in this game until that walk off ruse as time expired. So they should have won this game outright. But 3 times going for it on a 1st and goal and not making it, that's that's sad.
That's something they got to work on. It's something that's Saskatchewan defense, though, despite their record right now, the way they've kind of slipped, that Saskatchewan defense has got some players on it, and they've done their part every now and then. It's just that offense sometimes doesn't help them out. But yeah, you can't have that many opportunities if you're Toronto and not capitalize on them. And then
Right.
you get lucky. Like you should have just won that game outright by probably a couple of scores, and you end up on a last second rouge. So yeah, because like people like Barstool Sports and a bunch of other American accounts, like you were saying, totally dogging the CFL for this rule. Like I get it to an extent. We talked about on the podcast. Maybe the CFL does have to maybe look at, hey, let's just change the rouge rule for an end of the game kick because it is a little weird. But argument I made is like, look, in the NFL, ties happen. Sometimes a division winner has a sub 500 record and makes it into the playoffs and leaves a bunch of other good teams. Sometimes weird stuff will happen. It's just how the rules are, and it's not like it happens every year, and it's not like this happens every week. So I'm fine with just leaving the rule alone. If you want to make that one tiny tweak, sure. I ain't gonna go crying about it. Nah,
Yeah.
not this
No, we
American.
no, we like the Rouge. It's very Canadian. It's unique to the game up there, and it's beautiful. I like it. So don't change a thing.
Yeah.
A couple other notes from this game. The Argos equipment manager Danny Webb was honored at halftime of the game for 40 years of service to the team. He's been the equipment manager there since 1985. That's longer than you've been alive, isn't it?
Uh, Gee, you're the one who was there at my birth. I would feel like you should know the answer to this. But yes, it is longer than I have been alive.
Yeah. And another note, Saskatchewan kicker Brett Lothar redeemed himself after going 3 for 7 last week and missing a game-tying field goal that would have sent the game into overtime. So, I mean,
Seemed a
he was
little more
great this
dialed
week.
in.
Yeah, yep. So I don't know what was going on last week, but he's back to his old self this week.
All right, on Friday night, saw the Winnipeg Blue Bombers defeat the Hamilton Tiger Cats 26-23. In the second quarter, Hamilton wide receiver Jordan Bird got absolutely licked and fumbled the ball while returning a punt. It was scooped up by Winnipeg linebacker Michael Ayers and returned 27 yards for the touchdown. The Blue Bombers then added a field goal just before the half, making the score 16-3 in favor of the Blue Bombers. Hamilton running back Greg Bell had 2 rushing touchdowns in the third quarter, the first from 10 yards out and the second from 6 yards out, giving Hamilton their first lead of the game at 20-19. An interception by Hamilton led to another field goal and a 23-19 Hamilton lead. But Winnipeg marched down the field and scored on a touchdown pass to wide receiver Kenny Lawler with 23 seconds remaining in the game for the 3-point win. Winnipeg quarterback Zach Collaros completed 18 of 36 passes for 177 yards, a touchdown, and 3 interceptions. Running back Brady Oliveira ran the ball 18 times for 120 yards, and wide receiver Ontario Wilson had 7 catches for 72 yards. Kicker Sergio Castillo made 4 field goals, the longest of which was from 45 yards. On defense, defensive back Brandon Alexander had 5 tackles. For Hamilton, quarterback Bo Levi Mitchell completed 14 of 28 passes for 220 yards and no touchdowns. Running back Greg Bell carried the ball 12 times for 41 yards and 2 touchdowns, while wide receiver Tim White had 7 catches for 134 yards. Kicker Mark Leggio made 3 field goals, the longest from 50 yards. On defense, linebacker Kyle Wilson had 8 tackles and an interception. And Hamilton just can't catch a break. I mean, I thought they could pull this one out, but Winnipeg finally kind of looks like the team we've seen in years past. They finally, look like that team that we should now be looking at. Like, all right, they're back to being contenders, or at least in the conversation. So, what'd you make of this one?
Yeah, like you said, I thought Hamilton was going to win this game. I mean, they were playing well, and I don't know. They just blew it in the fourth quarter. They let them march down the field, score, and then they couldn't do anything after that. And they just Winnipeg just ran the clock out after that. So yeah, a little sad to see, but that's the way it is in the CFL.
Yeah, I mean, and for Hamilton, it's every week there's a little something. Like for a while, obviously with the way the Elks were playing, we were like the Elks are the worst team. Then maybe the Tiger Cats are right there. But I mean, it's kind of flip flop. I think now the Tiger Cats are seen as the worst team in the league right now. They've had some bad breaks as well, but not as much as I think the Elks had, where I felt like, the Elks, one or two things go the other way, the Elks, get some wins. The Tiger Cats, they just got to string a few more things together. They just need a little more consistency because they got playmakers. I think Bo Levi Mitchell's still a good quarterback. It's just I can't explain what really is happening with this team other than the defense is just not, doing their part of the bargain. I feel like Bo Levi Mitchell moves the ball down the field. He's got good receivers. It just isn't all clicking.
Yep, I agree. All right, on Saturday, it was the Ottawa Redblacks over the BC Lions 34-27. On their opening drive of the game, BC fullback David Mackey took the snap from center and scored on a 1-yard touchdown run to give the Lions a 7-0 lead. In the second quarter, Ottawa quarterback Drew Brown threw a touchdown pass to wide receiver Jalen Acklin, but the Redblacks still trailed 11-9. Ottawa kicker Lewis Ward added a 54-yard field goal just before the half, and BC led 17-14 at halftime. In the third quarter, Ottawa wide receiver Nick Mardner scored the first touchdown of his career with a 64-yard catch and run. A 2-point conversion by Raquel Armstead gave Ottawa their first lead of the game at 20-17. Nick Mardner added a second touchdown reception, extending the Redblacks' lead to 27-17. BC answered with a second touchdown run by David Mackey and closed the gap to 27-24 at the end of the third quarter. In the fourth quarter, Ottawa scored on a 1-yard run by backup quarterback Dustin Crum, his 7th touchdown of the season, putting the Redblacks up by 10, 34-24, with 5:32 remaining in the game. BC added a field goal late in the game, but Ottawa was able to run out the clock and claim their 7th win of the season. Ottawa quarterback Drew Brown completed 28 of 37 passes for 390 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. Running back Raquel Armstead ran the ball 15 times for 52 yards, and wide receiver Justin Hardy led the receivers with 11 catches for 114 yards. On defense, linebacker Javon Santos Knox had 8 tackles. For British Columbia, quarterback Nathan Rourke completed 22 of 31 passes for 234 yards, no touchdowns, and an interception. He also ran the ball 4 times for 63 yards. Running back William Stanback had 15 carries for 99 yards, and wide receiver Justin McInnes had 5 catches for 79 yards. On defense, linebacker Emmanuel Ragamba had 9 tackles and an interception. Yeah, in this game, BC kicker Sean White kicked his 46th straight field goal in the first quarter, but unfortunately his streak came to an end in the second quarter when he had a kick blocked. That's too bad. I was hoping he'd at least get to 50 before that streak ended.
That stinks. Well, the good thing about streaks that get broken is you can start them all over again. So
that's right. That's what they were saying after he did that. I think he had 2 more, so they're going, "Oh, the streak's now at 2
There
in the
you go.
fourth
So you
quarter."
got to look at the bright side of life.
Yeah. Yeah. The Red Blacks also honored their first All-Decades team during the game. Kicker Lewis Ward and kick returner and running back Devontae Dedman, uh, who are currently both Ottawa players, were on that list of the greatest players of the first decade for the Ottawa Red Blacks. So congratulations to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool that you finally got some 10th anniversary gear. You
I
sent me a
did.
picture in the mail, so you'll probably wear that on one of the future shows. It's some cool stuff. Good for
Yep.
that team being around 10 years. Uh, they've really taken a liking to the Red Blacks there in Ottawa, and I think they're here to
Yep.
stay.
Yep.
Great team. I love the atmosphere they got. The kind of the culture they got there around that team is a lot of fun. So it's pretty cool to get to this 10-year milestone.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we've seen this a lot lately. Ottawa wide receiver Jalen Acklin was taken off the field by ambulance in the fourth quarter, but he was released from the hospital the next day. Man, we've
Yep.
seen that a lot this year. This was like the third time I can remember in the last couple weeks that somebody's gotten injured and had to be taken off the field on an ambulance.
Yeah, you hate to see it. I mean, I don't know what's up in the water there in Canada, but yeah, you hate to always see something like this happen. So maybe it's just a bunch of weird, fluky coincidences, but yeah, it is rather bizarre.
Yeah.
Then on Sunday, the Montreal Alouettes defeated the Edmonton Elks 21-17. In the first quarter, Edmonton quarterback McLeod Bethel Thompson threw a touchdown pass to wide receiver Eugene Lewis, giving Edmonton a 7-3 lead. In the second quarter, Edmonton wide receiver Curly Gittins Jr. caught a touchdown pass, increasing the Elks' lead to 14-3. A late field goal by Jose Maltos gave Edmonton a 17-6 lead going into the half, but it would be all Montreal in the second half. During the third quarter, Montreal quarterback Cody Fajardo threw a pair of touchdown passes to wide receiver Cole Speaker, the first from 33 yards out and the second from 22 yards, giving Montreal an 18-17 lead. But even though Montreal led 21-17 late in the game, it all came down to the very last play where a pass to Curly Gittins Jr. in the end zone went incomplete and Montreal escaped with yet another victory. Montreal quarterback Cody Fajardo, who missed the last 4 games with a hamstring injury, completed 22 of 34 passes for 336 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Running back Walter Fletcher ran the ball 11 times for 54 yards, and wide receiver Cole Speaker had 5 catches for 107 yards and 2 touchdowns. On defense, linebacker Tyrese Beverett had 10 tackles and a tackle for loss. For the Elks, quarterback McLeod Bethel Thompson completed 21 of 33 passes for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. Running back Kevin Brown carried the ball 16 times for 105 yards, and wide receiver Tevin Jones had 5 catches for 67 yards. On defense, linebacker Nick Anderson had 8 tackles and another on special teams. Yeah, Edmonton being shut out in the second half just totally caught me off guard. They looked so good in the first half.
Yes.
I thought it was locked up. I figured Montreal would have to lose another game at some point, as great and as dominant as they've ended up being the last several weeks.
Yeah.
But I thought Edmonton could do it, but that Montreal defense came to play in the second half.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought, just like you, I thought Montreal's going to give, or Edmonton's going to give Montreal their second loss of the season. I was so looking forward to seeing that, but it just wasn't to be. I didn't even realize they were shut out in the second half till after the game. And I'm like, they didn't score anything. It was so weird.
I
And
didn't even realize that. Like I just knew that Montreal just had their number and Edmonton couldn't do anything in the second half. I didn't even realize that they didn't score a single point until you pointed it out later.
yeah. And this is their 10th win of the season for Montreal. They look pretty much unstoppable at this point. Uh,
Yeah.
During this game, the team also honored their 1974 Grey Cup championship team by wearing throwback uniforms and bringing out several players from that team at halftime. This was the 50th anniversary of that game, which ironically they beat Edmonton in that Grey Cup game in 1974 also. Um,
Yeah.
and a thing that came out today that I saw a little while ago, the Montreal Alouettes have won 18 of their last 19 games. It is the most successful 19-game stretch in modern CFL history, dating back to 1961. So, wow.
Wild.
Yeah.
Absolutely
It
wild
is.
stat. I saw that same post on their X account. I'm just like, really? Because I could have swore like something. like when you had a Winnipeg Blue Bombers team that was essentially going to go for, you know, back to back to back Grey Cups. At one point, I was like, they didn't have a stretch like that in there for as dominant as that team was. That's what blows my mind even more.
Yeah, yeah. And
So
then,
hey, kudos to them. That's a hard feat to do.
yep, absolutely. And then the Calgary Stampeders were on a bye this week. All right, let's take a look at the CFL standings after Week 12. In the East Division, it's Montreal with a 10-1 record, the Ottawa Redblacks at 7-2-1, Toronto Argonauts at 6-4, and the Hamilton Tiger Cats at 2-9. In the West Division, it's the Saskatchewan Roughriders at 5-5-1, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at 5-6, the BC Lions at 5-6, Calgary Stampeders at 4-6, and the Edmonton Elks at 3-8. Looking ahead to the Week 13 matchups, that's Labor Day weekend. On Saturday, it's the Ottawa Redblacks at the BC Lions. On Sunday, it's Winnipeg at Saskatchewan. On Monday, it's Toronto at Hamilton. And also on Monday, it's going to be Edmonton at Calgary. Montreal will be on a bye next week. Yeah, that Saturday game, the Ottawa at BC game, that's what's going to be known as the Touchdown Pacific game this week. They've done Touchdown Atlantic games the last few years, and this is the first time they've done a Touchdown Pacific. So I think it's kind of cool that they're doing that.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I like the Touchdown Atlantic game when they do that, and the fact that it's changing it up and doing a Pacific. I think that's cool to add to their like unique games that they do or special games that they can do every year. Like next week we got the Banjo Bowl. We'll talk about next week, and I don't know. I like that one year you could do the Atlantic, one year could do the Pacific, depending on how schedules and whatever work out. So I dig that they do stuff like that. And then, real quick, how about that West Division? By the way, like how I mean, you got all those teams are just so close together. You
Yeah.
know, 5 wins is the top team, 3 wins is the bottom. So there's only a couple games in between them. So much has been happening. Teams have been rising, teams have been falling. It's going to be a wild ride to the end of the season for the West Division because the East looks pretty much set. You already know your 3 playoff teams: Montreal, Ottawa, and the Argos are going to just, you know, take
Right.
care of that. Hamilton's that fourth kid that we don't talk about, but the West though is anybody's division.
Yeah, even Edmonton with only 3 wins. I mean, if they get their act together and start winning some games, and they've been close to winning a few games, since they started winning altogether, that they could be right in the thick of it. They could get that third playoff spot, no problem.
I
Yeah,
think
it
they
is.
will. They should have had a fourth win in a row this past weekend.
Yep.
They shoot those games. They lost 3 straight games on last second field goals. Should have probably had those ones. That's another 3 wins. So you're looking at a team that should have 7, 8 wins by now, which is crazy because
Yeah.
it's the opposite. They have 3 wins to 8 losses. So
Yeah.
I feel like that script should be flipped for the Edmonton Elks.
Yeah. All right, we do have one news item. An independent arbitrator has upheld the CFL's indefinite suspension of defensive lineman Sean Lemon for betting on CFL games, including one that he was playing in. The suspension was handed down to him back on April 24th of this year when it was discovered that he bet on games during the 2021 season while he was playing for the Calgary Stampeders. And he signed with the Montreal Alouettes last year in 2023. So, yeah, I'd say it's pretty much over for him.
It's dumb. I mean, we had to deal with that here in the States with some NFL guys, gambling on games. Those guys, though, I think like the couple of guys were betting on college games, some were betting on actual NFL games, which is a no-no. You just can't do it. If you play professional sports, why are you even bothering getting involved with gambling when you know
Yeah.
this is what could happen if you get caught? Like the odds of you getting away with it seem to get less and less. They got ways of finding out if players are gambling. So why even take the risk? It's just dumb. To me, this is just a nice way of pointing out who the dumb people are in these leagues because they got caught. It's just, I don't know. It's really dumb.
Yeah.
So I'm
And
done.
I don't think that all these betting apps, were that prevalent back in 2021, back when he was doing this. So I don't know if he was going to a local casino or what was going on, but
I
yeah,
I don't
it's a
know. I
sad
think that might have
situation.
been the start, with the DraftKings and all that stuff, the daily
Could be.
fantasy. And who knows, up in Canada, I'm sure they got different sports books
Yeah.
and different stuff
Yep.
up there. So, and who knows how that's regulated? Clearly, it's regulated just like down here in the States, where if you get caught gambling, it's, very, very frowned upon and you're going to get kicked out. So,
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all the time we've got for this week. Tune in again next week when Adam and I will review the week's games played in the Canadian Football League. We'll be doing this throughout the regular season and the postseason, as well as the 111th Grey Cup game in Vancouver this November, where we will be in attendance. Man, I'm looking forward to that.
I'm very excited.
So remember, folks, some people may love football more than we do, but nobody, and I mean nobody, loves more football than Adam and I sitting here in Kalamazoo. Until next time, I'm Randy Snow.
Have a fun, safe Labor Day, everybody up there in Canada.
And we'll see you next week. And we'll see you next week somewhere around the 55-yard line.